You're listening to Wake Up with Patti Katter, where we're overcoming trials with triumphs. Now, here's your host, Patti Katter.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again this week. I have Yehuda Remer on the show with me, the Pew Pew Jew. Hey, how's it going?
Going great. Thank you for having me back.
Good. I'm so happy to have you back. You are really fun to watch on social media, and you get people thinking, especially, when most people think about Jewish people, at least me or somebody who's not Jewish, we're like, oh, they're really conservative. But I don't mean just in politics. I mean with your life. I feel like most Jewish people that I know are pretty quiet and soft-spoken, and then there's you. So,
So
uh,
I used to be that soft-spoken Jew, but then I kind of wrote my books, entered the industry, and um, that all changed.
and I'm glad because you have a really strong message that needs to be shared. And that's why I wanted you to be on my show again. Last time you were on, we talked about a couple of the books that you've written and especially the children's books that you wrote about guns.
Yes.
And a lot of people might think that's controversial, but we talked a little bit about how it's important to teach your kids gun safety while they're little, and then that will hopefully prevent them from being stupid with them later, right?
Yeah, pretty much accurate. Yeah.
Mhm.
Teach gun safety at an early age. It's important.
Mhm. So, do you have any kind of slogan or anything that you use, or just a lot of it?
So I have two main slogans that I use to kind of push my message. One of them, which is I've been using longer, is never again means nothing if you're not willing to do something about it. And when I say willing to do something about it, I'm not talking about passing more anti-hate laws, because let's be honest, there's enough on the books and people are still perpetrating anti-Semitic crimes and hate crimes across the country. So it's not whether it's, I'm saying not even just anti-Semitic, just hate crimes in general. So that's one slogan that I use. But what I've kind of taken upon myself in the last year and a half, maybe it was even last year, I released a shirt that says "People with ARs don't get in cattle cars," and that one went mega viral. I had a lot of hate for that one because, like, "Oh, you're using money, you're using the Holocaust to make money." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm in it to make money, but my message is not just about Holocaust, it's about defending yourself against tyranny." And the left, the liberals, Democrats in the country are dying to take away our rifles, our AR-15s. But, people with ARs won't willingly get in cattle cars. And that one, like I said, struck a chord with a lot of people. It's since become probably one of my biggest selling items on my website.
Mhm. I wonder if it struck a chord because some people might not realize that actually happened. It's funny when I talk to my youngest, she's 23 and she doesn't remember 9/11. And of course, she knows the history. She knows her history classes. She knows all about the Holocaust. We talk about all of the history lessons that are to be learned and things like that. But if you don't experience or you don't know somebody who experienced it, sometimes it's hard to remember. And who would ever think for a second that if the government came knocking at your door and said, "Hey, get in this truck. I'm going to take you to this refuge or I'm going to take you to this reservation." How many people would be like, "Oh, the government's watching out for us. Let's go." And then they don't know what happens once they get there. And one thing I had mentioned before the show is I'm reading this book. It's called The Escape Artist. I've read a lot of different Holocaust books. The Diary of Anne Frank was my very first one that I read. And I'm not technically Jewish myself. According to my DNA, I have like 1%. So, but still, I feel drawn to make sure we get the right message out, and it's an important one. So, you have a very interesting family history that I want you to share with my listeners today because this is personal experience that first off, firsthand. It's not mainstream media. If you just kind of want to jump into that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, so you have I know the stories. You have to remind me which one it was, because both my grandfathers have unbelievable stories, and I don't remember which one you saw
Yeah,
that
so
prompted you to message me.
yeah, so I actually read one. It was about both of your grandparents. It was one had a picture of his number from a concentration camp, I believe.
Okay.
And then the other grandfather was one that was helping rescue Jewish people.
Oh, he was rescued. Yes. Okay. So I can go into both. It, we'll start, I guess, with I'll start with my mom's father. So he passed away about 8, 9 years ago, and he had the numbers B7397 tattooed on his arm. When he was 14 years old, him and his father were sent into a concentration camp. And when you entered the camp, they delouse you, or they did delouse you, and then they gave you clothes and kind of, the striped pajamas that we always see in the pictures. Whatever you got, right? You didn't get to choose the size. If it was too big, it was too big. And unfortunately, my grandfather, he was, I think, 13 at the time, maybe 12. Um, he got a pair of pants that were way too big. And if he couldn't keep up in the concentration camp doing, the daily routine and work, I mean, that's an automatic death sentence. So his father traded one day of rations to another Jewish uh, inmate there. I hate to use the word inmate, but anyways, another Jewish man there who had a belt, and traded the belt for one day ration so that my grandfather would be able to put a belt on and survive. My great grandfather unfortunately perished in the camp, and my grandfather actually survived. He was liberated by the Americans in 44 or 45. I don't remember when. And I guess late 44, early 45. He was at that time about 15, maybe 16, made his way to America, joined the US Air Force as a thank you for the Americans liberating him, um, met my grandmother, and lived out the rest of his life. When he passed away, he had, 3 kids. How many like 7 or not 8, maybe 9 grandchildren, and about 10 great grandchildren. He got to see them all. So that's his story, kind of in a nutshell. My father's father, who I really had the privilege of knowing, because he only passed away like about 5 years ago, and I'm 39. So I really had him my entire life. His story is crazy because his story is a different story of survival. His father, so my great grandfather, dealt with livestock in a small town called Kolomay, which was on the Russian Ukrainian slash Carpathian mountain border area. And my great grandfather dealt with livestock, and there was this really poor farmer who lived on the outskirts of the city. And every time this farmer would buy a cow or a horse, within like a week or two, the animal would die. And he couldn't keep an animal that would be able to produce crops for him or help work the land. He went to my great grandfather and said, I need an animal. I don't have money. Can you help me? And this is, I guess, in the early 30s, or mid 30s. My great grandfather gave him a horse, and this ended up being a godsend to the farmer because the horse survived. It was strong, healthy, was able to work the fields, and he was able to make enough money to at least provide for the family. As the Holocaust started creeping up, World War II was, the creeping up, because again started in Poland, and getting closer to where my grandfather lived. The writing was on the wall. They saw it, and he ran. My great grandfather ran to the farmer and said, I need you to hide me and my family. It was my great grandfather, my great grandmother, my great uncle, and my grandfather. And the farmer's like, no problem. I'll hide you. Not to worry. And of course, there was a lot of worrying because they turned into Jews. They could have made a lot of money. But the farmer went into his barn, cleared a whole area of hay, took boards, floorboards off, dug a massive, well, I can't say a massive pit, probably maybe 8 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and like 4 feet, sorry, 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. So it was not really that big to fit four individuals. Hid them in there, put the boards over, and put the hay back over. And the only time they were allowed out was 1 hour a night. That's if there was no one around to stretch their legs. The farmer's son would bring them food once a day. They had to use the bathroom in the pit. That they literally lived in this pit for 19 months. And in that time, my great grandfather died. Malnutrition and just, I guess, lack of sun. Just living in the pit and he was 6'2", yet he's in this tiny pit that is nothing. So he passed away, and one night my grandfather and the farmer's son took the body, buried him, and my grandfather went back into hiding. They were liberated by the Russians in 1944, I believe, and then went to a displaced persons camp, made it to America. Fast forward, in 1991, my father flew to Poland, went to the farm, and was able to locate every single bone from my great grandfather, excavated it, and then brought it to Israel, where he's now buried with my great grandmother side by side. So it's a crazy story of survival. Again, a lot of people are like, well, then he wasn't really part of the Holocaust. I'm like, well, yeah, he wasn't in a concentration camp, but he also lived 19 months in the hole because of the Nazis. So I get it. It's not your normal Holocaust story, but it is a story of survival that I think most people nowadays can't even comprehend.
Right. I mean, people complain if they don't have power, electricity. I can't imagine, a family living in a hole for even a couple of days.
Right,
Um, I remember we had this hurricane here and people were complaining because the power was out 48 hours. I mean,
right,
food goes flying off the shelves when, something happens. Uh,
right.
Imagine, gosh, all that they went through. Now, I think that one of your most important messages is, the point that we were also talking before the show that technically this could happen again if rights are taken away, right? Is
Yeah, I definitely think, I used to think that it couldn't happen again in America, but as I see our country spiraling down, I definitely think that there is room for it to happen. Now, I think there's enough good people in America that would prevent it from happening. They really don't care what color your skin is. They don't care what your religion is. They don't care about any of that. I think that there's enough good people that wouldn't allow it to happen.
now I know people listening to my show, they're like, oh my gosh, I thought Patty was not very political. Well, I'm not usually political on my shows, but I think that this is an important message. And honestly, I mean, those who know me know that I'm conservative. Um, I do know some Democrats who are kind of on the wall thinking, and Republicans too, to be honest, lately, because some Republicans are teetering on that wall of like not standing up for freedoms that we should have. It's in any political party, if you're not standing up for our freedoms and constitutional rights, then you're not for America. I'll just put that out there. We have a lot of people kind of swinging back and forth trying to appease one party or the other party, but they're not remembering what the basis of it is, which is our freedoms. And um, one graphic that you have on your social media, it's that one that you were talking about earlier about the AR-15. If people with AR-15s don't get into cattle cars,
Yes.
and I don't feel like that you're saying that to say, like, let's start a civil war or anything like that at all. I think you're saying that to it's like a big reminder of, oh my gosh, that actually happened. So I was wondering if you might share just a few experiences. I'm kind of putting you on the spot of maybe some things that happened during the Holocaust in case people don't actually remember or they weren't taught it in school because sometimes, and even if they were trying to, um, their teachers were trying to teach them, sometimes kids don't pay attention in class. So, um, some of the things that I just think of off the bat were, people being told that there's these reservations that they're going to be sent to, and they thought that it was going to be like kind of like an Indian reservation, which the Indians were forced to live on. Um, but in fact, there was a lot of stuff. So I just wondered if you could mention a couple of things.
I mean, you have gas chambers, you have Jews being led into the forest and being gunned down. You have in Ukraine itself, you have Babi Yar, which is great. I think it translates to grandmother's ravine, and I think 38,000 Jews were killed in 2 days there, just lined up on a cliff, shot, they fall in. Um, you have stories like that. I mean, you have Mengele, Dr. Mengele doing experiments on individuals, really horrible experiments. I mean, the list is so long of the atrocities that the Nazis did, not just on Jews, right? Like, I want people to understand, like, yes, Jews were the brunt of the killing. 6 million Jews were killed. However, I mean, it was political dissidents, Christians. I mean, you have like Bonhoeffer. You have so many other um, groups of people that were, considered not real people by the Nazis, and they were thrown into concentration camps as well. There's so many stories. It, it's hard to even choose what to talk about
Mhm.
because it's just never ending.
Yeah, one of the things that I was reading recently was a young man sharing his account of working. He was forced to work at the concentration camp. He was a Jew himself, but he was actually leading other Jewish folks into what they thought were going to be houses to go shower in, and they were going into these houses, and then the Nazis would gas chamber them. Basically, they would lock them into these houses, but these people were just going to these homes, going to these houses that they thought were going to, they were going to go stay in or live in or get cleaned up in or whatever. And then they were actually getting killed. They were being led to the slaughter. And even that young Jewish guy, he said something about how he didn't know how to stop it. He knew that he would not just be killed, but the other workers that were at the concentration camp, and he didn't want to risk their lives either. And he didn't know what to do. He was like 14 years old, and and to me, like, what would you do, right? So he was devising a plan to escape and go tell people because people didn't realize what was going on. And I think that one thing that's kind of shaken me lately studying up more about the Holocaust, because honestly, I didn't know. I knew some of it, but I didn't know half of it. And it's easy to just go on about your day to day life and forget about these things. And your social media pops up in my Facebook and reminds me from time to time that we have to be vigilant. We have to be so careful. And mainstream media has been really bad at dividing people and not teaching them the basic rights that we have some of them are taken away, some of them are censored. Have you gotten censored on social media for posting
Oh
about
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been censored a lot, shadow banned a lot. Um, Social media does not like to hear about people enjoying freedom. And if that means you have to rehash the past and bring it up, then they don't like that. They feel that me posting a picture of my grandfather with his numbers tattooed on his arm, well, that's going to offend some people. I'm like, well, yeah, it might offend some people, but at the end of the day, it it's a lesson from history. Like you can't whitewash history. Um, I am of the belief, and I always get into trouble when I say this, but I know you and I are pretty good friends, and I say a lot of things that get me into trouble. But I really feel that Jews nowadays, two things, they need to move on from the Holocaust, and that's where I get in trouble, right? Move on. It happened 80 years ago. We all have stories. All of our grandparents went through it. It's time to move on. However, moving on doesn't mean forget and learn, right? We need to stop making ourselves out to be victims because let's be honest, I was not in the Holocaust. I grew up in a cushy house in California, Los Angeles. I was never in the Holocaust. I heard the stories. I lost over 60 relatives, but I wasn't there. So it's time to move on and stop using the Holocaust as a crutch that if someone says something or if someone does something, it's, God forbid, it's anti-Semitic. Like, it's not anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic. Yeah, it's okay to criticize people and who might disagree with you, but I think moving on is important, but not forgetting about it. And that does mean that history is not supposed to be cushy. It's brutal, it's bloody, it's gory, it's sad. But the famous line, right? Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And I will try my hardest to make sure that my kids don't have to hide in the attic any day while we're living in America. That's why I do what I do.
You know, up until maybe 9/11, I remember being an American, not worrying at all about our freedoms because that time frame, I guess, from probably the time before I was born, so Vietnam, World War II, I didn't experience those things personally. I was raised in a really patriotic home, but still, there was that gap, right? That everything was perfect, everything was peachy, everything was wonderful. And then 9/11 happened. And then we go again, and America rebuilds itself. Remember all the people who came together for 9/11 too, by the way? It didn't matter any political stance, everybody came together and helped each other. Well, then we're going through COVID, and some people are not gonna like this, but people are fighting in the grocery stores. People are literally fighting over toilet paper.
Yeah.
And I just feel that we've kind of spiraled down slowly. It's not a fast spiral like 9/11 was when something major tragic happened. It's a different kind of a freakish spiral, in my opinion. What do you have for me on that?
No, I think it is. I think that once again, the people in the country we live in have become very soft have become very soft with their way of living, and they would rather live in ignorance than actually open their eyes to the truth. So if the government is saying something, they're going to just sit there and stoke it all up and do what the government says. That's why you get people, the government's like, oh my God, we're running out of this. So everyone's rushing to go get toilet paper. And they're literally fighting tooth and nail for a roll of toilet paper. And it's sad that, I mean, I'm like, I'm not afraid to talk about it, but like, I didn't get vaccinated, and my wife really wanted it, and then one day she didn't, then she did, and she got pregnant, and I told her, I'm like, look, this is what I'll tell you. We still have no idea what's going on. This was late 2020. So we still have no idea what's going on. Yes, they just rolled out the vaccine. Yes, everyone's getting it. Yes, all these doctors are saying it's important to get. I said, but I'm asking you to do two things. A, only get the vaccine if you think it's actually going to work. Don't get it because you want to go travel to go see your family or go on a vacation. Get it because you think it actually will work. And I asked her, please don't get it until after you have the baby and you're done nursing because I said, our kids are not going to get it. It's just not happening. So she agreed. She's like, okay, that's a fair ask. And as things started coming out through 2021, then 2022, she's like, oh my God, everything you said you were right about, like all these, side effects are happening and people are dropping dead at record rates, young people. And um, she ended up deciding not to get it. And I explained to her, I'm like, think about all the people who were so scared and just listened to the government because the government said to do it. I said, these are the same people who, if the government said, hey, we've got a great area in Yellowstone for you where you can live freely and blah, 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 and live in this camp where everyone's vaccinated. I said, how many people do you think are going to jump on that train to get there? And she thinks about it and she's like, kind of like the Holocaust. I'm like, kind of like the Holocaust. I said, except the difference is these people will not need to be forced to get on the train. And during the Holocaust, a lot of them were forced to be on the train. So she's like, okay, that actually makes sense. And I think when you have people relying on the government so much, they lose track of the truth because the government rarely tells us the truth.
Yeah, and the government is supposed to work for us. And
Right,
people forget that. People are like, "Oh, the government is in control of us." They're supposed to work for us.
right.
And this is probably going to be it actually is my most quote unquote controversial show for me to roll out. Usually I don't talk about anything that's controversial when it comes to politics, but I don't know. I guess I'm in a new phase where something has to change. Next year we vote and we need to fix some problems here. And I know for me personally, I was not able to see some family members because they thought that they needed to get the vaccine. They wouldn't see anybody who didn't have the vaccine. I wouldn't get vaccinated, although I had COVID. I had the natural antibodies. So I missed family time. I had a friend, her dad died in the nursing home because they would not let her come into the nursing home at all. Even like they didn't have the
Right.
vaccination yet. So she couldn't see her own father when he was dying. And so many places across America had those rules, and it's wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say this, Fauci has a very special place waiting for him downstairs. He will be burning in hell for a very long time. And, that's one thing that at least I can, kind of a silver lining to know that he's going to be in hell for eternity because he is an evil, evil person.
Well, and the other thing is too that is the people who will listen to one person such as Fauci, because one person alone can't do anything. It's the people behind him, it's the people supporting him, the people pushing out the message. I don't know if any of you've been to the CIA museum in DC, but you can see the whole propaganda display right there on display showing and research this. I'm just not making this up. Go online, research propaganda. It's been going on as long as America's been here, and probably before in different ways, but it's a big thing. Anyways, I'm really thankful you came on my show. Do you have your own podcast yet?
I don't. I keep trying. I keep thinking about it, but here's the thing. I deal with guns, right? So when you're dealing with guns, there are so many podcasts out there. It's such an oversaturated market. I am not going to launch a podcast until I have an angle that, and not just like, oh, here's a Jew and guns, right? Like that's fresh, that's new. Yeah, but I'm going to be talking about the same thing anyone else would be saying. So um, until I find a angle that is really fresh and new, I just don't feel like it's going to be successful. I mean, like I said, I might get some followers, some some hits here and there, but I want something that people will want to come back and listen to every week, even if it's once a week. Yeah, there has to be something different and new. Otherwise, I'm just gonna fall into the folds of the podcast world, and no one's gonna even think about it.
I have a couple ideas we'll talk about after.
Sounds good.
And
Absolutely.
maybe if it's not even your own show, getting you onto some more shows in the meantime. But I
Yeah.
do have some ideas for you. I think that
Cool. I'm all ears.
yeah, you would be phenomenal, I think. So,
Thank
and
you.
and I don't usually call people like that out on my show either and be like, "Hey, you got a podcast yet? Because you need one."
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being on my show. Could you please share your social media handles so people can follow
Yes,
you?
absolutely. Please, if you want to follow me on social media, it's at the Pew Pew Jew, the Pew Pew Jew, not Pew Pew Jew. There's always a the. Everyone's like, I can't find you. I'm like, did you put in the? And they're like, oh, there you are. And then you can go to my website, get signed copies of my books and some really fun merchandise, thepewpewjew.com.
Yes, everybody go check it out, thepewpewjew.com and the Pew Pew Jew on social media. And if all else fails, get a hold of me and I'll put you in touch. So, thank you again for being on the show. And thank you everybody for listening. I know that this week was a little bit different than my normal episode, but I feel like it was a very important message. And you might hear more shows like this in the near future. So, take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Please head over to PattiKatter.com for the latest updates on Patti, her talk show, and what she's up to. You can also find her on Amazon TV and Roku, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Patti Katter. Until next time.